we got section 2.7, transitive and substitution properties. Our objective for this section is to apply the transitive and substitute properties of angles and segments. For classwork tomorrow, we'll be working on page 97 to 99, 2 to 16 evens. Please look through those problems, as if you have questions, we'll make sure we address them tomorrow in class. The first thing we're going to talk about is the transitive property. The transitive property states if angles or segments are congruent to the same angle or segment, they are congruent to each other. The transitive property also states if angles or segments are congruent to congruent angles or segments, they are congruent to each other. Now, oftentimes when I think about the transitive property, I also refer to this as the cross-out properties. They're the cross-out properties not between complementary and supplementary, like we saw earlier in the chapter, but between congruency statements. Okay, so let's draw pictures for both transitive with angles and transitive with segments. Let's say that I have angle A, which is 32 degrees, and angle B, which is also 32 degrees. Since they have the same measure, I can say that angle A is going to be congruent to angle B. Now, let's say that I have angle C. And what I know about angle C is that angle C is going to be congruent to angle B. Well, if angle B is 32 degrees and it's congruent, I now know that angle C is going to be 32 degrees as well. Looking at all three angles, I see that all three angles have the same measurement, which must mean that angle A is going to be congruent to angle C. Now, looking at my congruency statements, what I notice here is that angle B is repeated. I can cross it off, and by applying the transitive property to angles, that's how I can conclude that angle A is congruent to angle C. Now let's work our way through transitive with segments. Let's say that I have segment AB, and let's say that it's going to be 2 units long. And let's say I have segment CD, and that's also going to be 2 units long. Since they have the same measure, I can say that segment AB is going to be congruent to segment CD. Now, let's say I have segment EF and segment GH. And let's say they're congruent, therefore they have the same tick marks. We can say segment EF is congruent to segment GH. Now, let's add one more statement. Let's say that I know that segment CD is going to be congruent to segment EF. Now, if CD is 2, that would make CF also 2. And since CF is congruent to GH, GH would also be 2. Using that transitive property, I look for repeats. And here's what I notice. CD was repeated, and so was EF. And looking at my picture, all 4 segments have the exact same unit. By the transitive property, I can then deduce that segment AB is going to be congruent to segment GH by the transitive property. What do you think? Not so bad? I hope not. So now we're going to talk about how the substitution property is going to be used in algebra. The way we use substitution, a lot of times what we saw is when we were solving systems. What we did is we used the substitution property as a replacement property. When we knew the value of one variable, we would plug it in, such as if we had the equation 3x plus 2y equals 7, and we knew that x equaled 2, we would take that 2, and we would plug it right on in for our x. Now, how do you think we're going to use that in geometry? We're going to use it the exact same way, as a replacement property. Transitive is going to be the cross-out property that's used within congruency statements. Substitution is going to be used more as a replacement property. We know things are equal, one can replace the other. Alright, so now let's start trying to prove. We're given that BY is congruent to MO, YL is congruent to MO, and we're going to try and prove that BY is congruent to YL. I want you to take a second and think about this. It's only going to be a 3-step proof, and let's see what you can do. Press pause and let's go. So here we go. Here's going to be my statement and reasons. I'm going to start off by writing my givens. Now, I'm going to strongly encourage you to always draw out your picture. That way we can put in our tick marks as needed. So we're going to start off with BY is congruent to MO. The reason is because it's given. And also, YL is congruent to MO. Also because it's given. Now, I'm going to start by putting some tick marks in here. BY is congruent to MO. YL is also going to be congruent to MO. We should see on our picture that all 3 segments have identical tick marks. It's kind of like having identical numbers to go with them. And what I see here on my proof is that MO is repeated. So for my next statement, I can put in that BY is going to be congruent to YL. My reason is the transitive property. Not so bad, right? Alright, let's move on. Alright, we're given that angle W is congruent to angle I, and also that angle L is congruent to angle I. We want to try and find the measure of I in terms of A and in terms of M. Now, first and foremost, is this going to be a proof? Absolutely not. We have find, not prove, or conclusion. Now, if we want to find I in terms of A and M, what that means is we're not going to have a simple number answer. We're going to be having an answer that has the letters A and M included in them. Well, let's look at those givens, and I see a repeat right away. Angle I repeats, so one thing that I can conclude is going to be that angle W is going to be congruent to angle L. Now, since I know these 2 angles here are going to be congruent, I can take their measurements and set them equal. So A plus P plus M is going to be equal to 2P plus A. Now, I only want A and M. So the first thing that I want to do, I'm going to want to subtract A from both sides, which leaves me with P plus M equals 2P. Next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract P to both sides, which leaves me with M equals P. Now, if M equals P, anytime I see an M, I can replace P, and vice versa. This is where our substitution property is going to come in. I only want A and M. Now, since I know all 3 angles are congruent to each other, I'm going to come right back up here, and instead of having a P, I'm going to plug in that M. So angle I is going to equal A plus M plus M, which is going to be A plus 2M. It's going to be the measure of angle I in terms of A and M. A little bit confusing, so tomorrow I want to hit a couple more like this. If you have questions, please make sure you note it, and we'll make sure we talk about it tomorrow. Alright, we got one more proof. We're given that angle A is a right angle, angle B is a right angle, and angle B is congruent to angle D. We're going to try and prove that angle A is congruent to angle D. Now, for this proof, we're going to have a total of 5 steps. Let's press pause, see what you can do, and then we'll go through it together. Okay, here we go. So here's our statement and reason. Start off with our givens. Angle A is a right angle. That's given. Angle B is also a right angle. That's given. Angle B is congruent to angle D. That's given. Angle A is a right angle. I'm going to put my box in there again. Always draw out your picture and always make your markings. Angle B is a right angle. Angle B is going to be congruent to angle D. Alright, hold that thought for a second. First and foremost, I'm looking at angle A and angle B, and they have the same tick marks on them. They're both right angles. So what does that mean for angle A and angle B? It means they're congruent to each other. So let's write that down first. Angle A is congruent to angle B. My reason? If two angles are right angles, they are congruent. Beautiful. B and D are congruent. They're going to have the same tick marks as well. Now, you do want to note this. If you're showing the same tick marks, which are right tick marks, and you never said angle D is a right angle, that's okay. Just know if you need angle D to be a right angle, you got to make sure you state it and you have a reason for it. Now, we're going to apply our transitive property. And what I see right now is that angle B is repeated, which means by applying the transitive property, what I'm going to be left with here is that angle A is congruent to angle D. The reason? The transitive property. Hopefully that was pretty good for you. We don't have any questions. If you do, make a note of it and we'll make sure we get to it tomorrow. Last but not least, here's the answers to tomorrow's classwork. If you're looking ahead, make sure you're getting these answers. If you're not, we definitely have things we need to discuss tomorrow in class. If you're looking at this after the classwork and we're still not doing it, okay, we definitely have something we need to talk about before moving on to the next section. So make sure you make yourself a little note of it and let me know what you're having a hard time with. Have a good one.